Here are my recommendations for the racket level. If you are a beginner, you should choose a racket that's between 250 and 270 grams. If you are a intermediate player, you should choose a racket that's between 270 and 300 grams. If you are a high level recreational player, let's say 5.0 level, you should choose a racket that's between 300 and 320 grams. When it comes to the head size, it really doesn't matter because most rackets come in a 98 or 100 square inch head size. What I recommend to most players is to stick to those weight guidelines that I just provided to you. These are very important. I often find, for example, beginners that pick up a racket like this one that's 300 grams and that's way too heavy for a beginner. Or, for example, I see some advanced recreational players who will play with a racket that's more for elite level players. For example, Novak Djokovic, I heard, has a very heavy racket, and some recreational players will put lead tape on their racket and make their rackets extremely heavy. And this is a very dangerous proposition that can possibly lead to some frustrating injuries. For example, I used to play with a Wilson Hyperhammer 5.2 that was originally 305 grams, and I put lead tape on there and my racket was around 340 grams altogether. However, now that I'm not playing actively anymore, that would be way too heavy for me. I would not be able to play with it. If I play with a racket that heavy, I would immediately get problems with my elbow or my shoulder. Therefore, right now in my current physical ability, 300 grams is the perfect weight for me. And the reason why I'm telling you this is that with age, your athletic abilities are going to decline. Therefore, the racket weight needs to go down and not up, because with a lighter racket and less athleticism, it's going to be a lot easier to play tennis. So for all you guys that ask me questions about customization and lead tape, I can tell you that you should be very careful not to go too heavy on your rackets. I see so many players these days with tennis elbow. It's rampant currently, whether it's the strings that are being strung too tight or it's the rackets that are simply too heavy. A lot of players, for example, play with the Roger Federer racket, the real version that's too heavy, and they're at the intermediate level and they are big fans of Roger and they want to play with his racket. But unfortunately, it's a very difficult racket to handle for players of that level. The only exception would be players that are really strong. I have some players that take lessons with me who are built very strong. They're just naturally very strong players. Therefore, if the racket is too light, it's not going to work for them. So those type of players can play with a racket that's a little bit heavier regardless of their level. All right guys, grip size, another super important thing when it comes to tennis rackets. The best measurement that I can give you for grip size is simply grip the racket like this, put your thumb upwards, and now we have a gap here. You put your index finger in the gap and it should fit snugly in this gap with no spaces on either side. This is a 4 3/8 grip that I play with. So you have to make this test. If the fingers are too tight together, if there's no gap, the grip is going to be too small. If the gap is too wide and you put your finger in and you have enough space here in between, then your grip is going to be too big. You have to make sure that you play with the correct grip size.